Hello there, everyone, and welcome back to the GSL-English Podcast. My name is, of course, Gideon, and I am here, as always, to help you take in, to absorb, and immerse yourself in the English language in a relaxed and natural way. Thank you so much for joining me again. If you are a returning viewer or listener, I do very much appreciate it. And if you are new here, then you are most welcome. Hello. Thank you for clicking on this podcast. As I said, the purpose of this podcast is to help all learners of English take in the English language in an as authentic and real way as possible. So if you do want to learn some new vocabulary, learn some new expressions, and just practice your listening skills, then you have most certainly come to the right place. And the focus of today's episode is going to be about overthinking. Okay? Now, I don't know whether you are naturally an overthinker by nature. Perhaps you are. I don't know. I know there's certain areas where I do overthink. I think it's part of human nature, isn't it? But some to more degrees, to more extreme degrees than others. But actually, overthinking is one of the biggest hindrances when it comes to speaking in a foreign language. And of course, we're going to focus on English. Overthinking is a real block. It's a wall that we either have to go over or just smash through. So we're going to look at that today. We're going to look at how we can just stop or try to stop overthinking. But before we get into it, we're going to have a little bit of a natter, a little bit of a ramble. So today's episode is going to be a concoction of everything. You know, some episodes are either a ramble, a natter, some are a story, some are an article. But today we're just going to do a little bit of everything. So the first thing I want to talk about is something that a surprising amount of you pointed out from last episode, okay, that came out on Thursday. Yes, I know it was a day late. I'm sorry. All I can do is apologise. But that wasn't what you pointed out. You pointed out that I ever so slightly changed my intro. And you said, what on earth's going on, Gideon? I was expecting you to say one thing, but you said another. And all I can do is give a public apology for that. I didn't realise how much you got used to a certain intro. I just kind of did it by habit. But in last week's episode, I just mixed it up a little bit. You know, I'll be honest with you, I do that to try and get the views. You know, just change it up a little bit. Just different ways to draw people in, which actually didn't work at all. Last Thursday's episode didn't do very well. But hey-ho, it's not about numbers. Doesn't matter. But yeah, I changed the wording. So my usual wording for an introduction is this. Hello there. Welcome back to the GSL-English Podcast. My name is, of course, Gideon, and I am here to blah, blah, blah. But I mixed it up in the last one. I chose to slightly change the wording to my introduction. I changed it to hello and welcome to the GSL English Podcast. My name is Gideon. And you did not like it. The fact that I took out that my name is, of course, Gideon, it just didn't go down well. So all I can do is apologise. You know, we're creatures of habit, aren't we? We know what we like and we like what we know. We like routine. We like structure. And I broke that by changing 2 words in my introduction. So all I can do is apologise. Please forgive me. And I won't do it again. Okay? I won't do it again. If you've got any suggestions for the introduction, let me know. Perhaps I should spice it up a little bit with a bit more of a statement. I don't know. Got any suggestions? Let me know. But, we're going to go back to normality. Okay? So I'm not going to mix things up again. I'm not going to try and just get, I just pushed it a little bit. So that was the first point. The second point is really just asking for your help. Next week's episode will be a bit of a celebration episode. If you saw my post I put out on the community posts on YouTube, you'll know that next week's episode is very roughly a year since I put out my first YouTube video. So we're going to celebrate that. I think that's a pretty cool achievement. We've grown a little bit over the year. Perhaps could have been more, but not complaining. We take what we get. But it's a year. And I think that is a real achievement for all of us. And, when I first started YouTube, the idea wasn't to have a podcast, but it is very naturally and organically gone that way, that we've got this kind of English learning podcast now. So what I'm going to do is we're going to do a little celebration of the GSL-English Podcast, how I started, why I started, and where I want it to go, okay? But what I would love to do, if you've got any thoughts on the podcast, so if there's perhaps any episodes you particularly enjoyed, let me know in the comments. Just tell me your story. Or I would love to know how you stumbled across this podcast. Just if you've got any stories related to this podcast, to my podcast, write them down in the comments or send me an email, GSL-English1@gmail.com, and I'm going to read out my favourites next week, okay, for next week's podcast. So if you can do that, if you've got anything, it doesn't have to be groundbreaking, just let me know, and I would love to read some of your thoughts out on this podcast for next week. That's just a little bit of a celebration. Okay, so yeah, feel free to do that. All right, but let's get into the main point of this week's episode, and that is overthinking. Overthinking is one of the most annoying things, isn't it? And it doesn't help when somebody says, just stop overthinking. You're overthinking it. Stop doing it. That doesn't help, does it? That's useless advice, because we all overthink for different reasons. We fabricate in our mind scenarios that are never going to happen, or outcomes that are bad, that really are not realistic. We overthink. And perhaps you are generally an overthinker. It's frustrating, isn't it? I am. It is really, really annoying. And often the things that you overthink about, the outcomes that you worry about, that you think are going to happen, never become a reality. So then that happens, and then your mind just moves on to the next thing to overthink about. But of course, applying this to the English language, overthinking is a real problem, particularly when it comes to speaking in English, because we overthink everything. We overthink our pronunciation, our choice of words, what we are going to say, how it will be received, what people will think of us. And what it does, overthinking just puts a wall up between us and communication. And that is an issue. We need to try and stop that. So we're just going to look at an article that says that what we can do with too many thoughts. And perhaps this is something you've been through, that maybe you're in a situation where you want to talk, but then you start overthinking what you are going to say. And then because you're overthinking, you think yourself out of even doing it. So because you've overthought it so much, you no longer want to be involved. You no longer want to speak in English. Or another situation, perhaps you are speaking in English and you make a mistake, a pronunciation mistake, or you use the wrong word, and then you overthink that. And then that stops you next time and knocks your confidence. And perhaps you're worried about an opinion that you want to express, and then you overthink it to the point of not expressing it. Overthinking is a problem. It really is, because there is a certain amount of thought that is always needed, isn't there? Whatever we're doing, there has to be an element of thought. There has to be a thinking or a thought process. But the issue is when we overthink, when we think past the point that is necessary. There's a certain amount of thinking that is always necessary, particularly when we're speaking in a second language. There's a thought process, isn't there? But that needs to stop at a certain point. So we're going to look at that today. What can we do to stop overthinking? So let me just find my specs, my glasses. I've lost them. Where are they? Oh, got them. There we go. Got them. Okay, chuck my specs on. We're going to read an article. Okay. Now, I've put a link to the article in the description. So if you would like to read along with me, of course, you're more than welcome. You can do that on YouTube. If you'd like to have a look back and have a look at it on your own, then of course, as always, you are more than welcome. I always encourage to listen or go through these episodes a few times. It doesn't always just have to be once and done. Go through them a few times and perhaps just read the article on your own after listening to this. But my computer's just going a little bit crazy, so let me I'm going to screen record. You think I've been doing this for a while now, I'd get a bit better at it. But technologically, I'm just inept. I'm not very good at it. Okay, so you should see that now on the screen. There you go. Okay, brilliant. All right, so the article is entitled... Sorry, I feel like I've got a sneeze coming and it's driving me insane. So if I do just randomly sneeze, I'll try and do it away from the microphone, but I do apologise. Do you ever feel like that? You've just got a sneeze that's waiting to come out. It just doesn't happen. My wife does this thing. When you're about to sneeze, she always shouts cucumber and it stops the sneeze and it drives me mad because I feel like she's stolen the sneeze from me because a sneeze is a very satisfying thing, isn't it? I'm about to sneeze and then she goes, cucumber! And it stops you sneezing. Give it a try. Okay, next time you see somebody about to sneeze, preferably someone you know, but hats off if you do it to a stranger. Just shout cucumber at them, and I guarantee it will stop the sneeze. But yeah, so I feel like I've got a sneeze coming, so if I do, I apologise. All right, back to it. Are we recording? Yes, I think we are. It's going into a little bit of mayhem this episode, but I'm trying to draw it back in, trying to reel a bit of sanity back in. Okay, so what we're going to do this time, we're going to read the article just bit by bit. We're not going to read it in its entirety and then just break it down. So we're going to take the first 3 paragraphs and just isolate some statistics and points. So, too many thoughts. What can we do about overthinking? Morrissey, the British musician, spoke for millions of us when, in his song Our Frank, he sang, "Won't somebody stop me from thinking all the time, about everything?" Research has suggested that at least 50% of people are chronic overthinkers, and that number may be as high as 73% among younger adults. If you are one of those people, you may feel like Morrissey, that you could sometimes do with a break from all those thoughts. So we're starting off here with a quote from Morrissey, famous British musician, famously known from a band called The Smiths. They did a song called There's a Light. It's a famous lyric, "There's a light and it never goes out." He sounds a lot better than that, but that's kind of the famous lyric. You might know him. I went to see him live in Brixton. I was actually quite underwhelmed. I didn't think he was that good. But yeah, anyway, that's besides the point. Morrissey, famous British musician, sang this song, lyrics in his song Our Frank. "Won't somebody stop me from thinking all the time about everything?" So what was Morrissey trying to say here? Well, it wasn't just literally, I want to stop thinking, because that isn't the point of this, isn't it? He says, to stop thinking about everything all the time. Basically, my mind is just always active, thinking about absolutely everything. And a lot of what we think about is hypothetical, isn't it? It's not a reality. It's not real. So he's saying, will somebody just stop me from doing this? From always thinking so much. Do you ever feel like that with English? Will somebody please just help me to stop overthinking it and just do it? Even to the point perhaps you're thinking about a new English project or a study plan. You overthink it. When in reality, you could just get up or just switch YouTube on and do something to do with English. But we overthink it. So can you relate to that? Won't somebody stop me from thinking all the time about everything? And it goes on to say, it's quite interesting, that research suggests that 50% of people are chronic overthinkers. We actually looked at this word chronic in last week's episode, but chronic is something that doesn't go away. It's always there. It's repeated. So 50% of people are chronic overthinkers, always overthinking. And an interesting point here that among younger adults, that number could be as high as 73%. And I would go as far to say that I think most people, particularly in the way the world is, the stresses, we overthink. Perhaps we feel like we overthink everything. And I like this point. You sometimes feel that you could just do with a break from all those thoughts. Could you imagine just having a conversation in English without overthinking it? Just enjoying it. How good would that be? And how much would that open up so many opportunities? Perhaps you want to speak in English, but you always overthink it. Well, just imagine if that was gone. It doesn't mean your level of English changes, but it's just that barrier is gone. Could you imagine if that wasn't there? Well, it doesn't need to be there. Perhaps we can remove it. And as I say, that doesn't mean your English level is immediately going to improve. But the opportunities for improvement are so much greater because you're not overthinking it. You're just doing it. So what is overthinking? Well, it goes on to say, overthinking is not only, considering something deeply. According to Cambridge Dictionary, it refers to thinking about something too much in a way that is not useful. Okay, so, and that's the main point with overthinking. Thinking about something deeply or on a deep level can be helpful, can't it? We can benefit from that. We do it a lot. But here, according to the Cambridge Dictionary, overthinking is about thinking about something to a point where it's just not useful anymore. It's too much. And it's true, isn't it? There is a certain element of thinking, a thought process, which you benefit from, which is necessary. But then there is a point where it's just completely irrelevant. You come up with hypothetical situations that are not real. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about overthinking, thinking to the point where it is no longer useful. I'm sure many of you can relate to that. I know I certainly can. Overthinking things to a point where it's just ridiculous, makes you feel anxious, blah, blah, blah. It's so frustrating. Goes on to say, philosopher Alan Watts said it's even more serious than that. Just as you have to stop talking to hear what others have to say, you have to stop thinking to find out what life is about, he once said. I'm just going to read that again because that's quite an interesting point. Just as you have to stop talking to hear what others have to say, you have to stop thinking to find out what life is about. That's a really, really interesting point. Because it's true, isn't it, that if you're in a conversation, if you want to hear what others have to say, you generally have to stop talking. Stop talking and just listen. Or sometimes we have to stop thinking to find out what life is about. And that almost sounds a little bit contrary, doesn't it? And I think we can so easily apply that to English. Sometimes we just have to stop thinking and just see what English is all about. Just naturally, authentically, just improve, and just relax and absorb it and take it in. Overthinking just stops us so much, doesn't it? It is a real problem. And it's a serious thing, that if we overthink everything, we actually, according to this quote, we miss the understanding of what life is actually about. So overthinking is serious. We really want to try and avoid it. This article goes on to say, of course, that's easier said than done. Love that expression. That's easier said than done. If something is easier said than done, it basically means that it's easier to say than it is to do. We use this all the time in English. Well, that's easier said than done. So imagine if you went to a friend and said, look, I want to improve my English, but I just keep overthinking it. And a friend said, well, just stop thinking so much. Brilliant advice, thanks. That's easier said than done. It is easier to say than to do. For example, if somebody said, I don't know, if I went to my friend and I said, I want to build some more muscle. And he said, well, just sort your diet out and go to the gym every day. Rubbish advice, isn't it? Easier said than done. So what can we do? Well, there's a few really lovely suggestions here. And we're going to apply them, of course, to English. But of course, I always try and choose articles which we can also apply in life. So, of course, our main primary focus is our English, our learning of English and improving it. But perhaps some of these you can just actually apply in your day-to-day life. I don't know, maybe you can. If you can, brilliant. One common suggestion is writing down your thoughts. Social media influencer Josh Otusanya shared this idea on TikTok, saying it helps his brain let go of some of those thoughts and also makes him realise that some of his worries are not that important after all. Okay, just going to change the spelling of realise there for those on YouTube. Of course, in British English, it is with an S and not a Z. So I should have done that earlier, but as always, I'm very unprepared. This is an interesting point, that sometimes when you write down your thoughts, you realise how, if we're being honest, how ridiculous they actually are, because you see them written down and you think, oh yeah, that is stupid. So maybe that's a thought or a process we could do, writing down our thoughts. And I do this with a few of my students that want to work on confidence, or my clients, they've got business meetings and they want to feel more confident. So what I get them to do is often just to write down what they're most worried about. And it is really interesting that the connection you make between your thoughts and how ridiculous they are when you actually write them down. Because that process of writing and reading them, you realise, oh, that's ridiculous, actually. It's like you take them out of your mind and you bring them to reality, and then you realise that it was just a silly thought. And also another reason we can do that is having your thoughts written down could also help you to find ways to solve a problem or answer a question. Now, I would highly recommend pen and paper. We're not using pen and paper enough these days. Grab yourself a notepad if you're an overthinker or you want to improve your English listening skills. Write down your thoughts. Write down your concerns, what you're worried about. And when you see them written down, you can often solve the problem or fix the issue in a much clearer way, because you're isolating the thoughts, kind of picking it out of all of the other crazy thoughts that are going on in your brain. You kind of pick it out, put it down on a piece of paper, and you've isolated it. Now you can just focus on that one thought that is on your paper. And because you have that, you can then assess it in a much clearer and beneficial way. Otherwise, we just got tons and thousands of thoughts floating around in our mind. We can do this with English. Write down what we are worried about, what we are overthinking, what is holding us back, and then look at it and just see perhaps why that perhaps might not be the case, or we might see a way that we can address and fix that problem. US health website Healthline suggests making an action plan, perhaps for one of the things you've written down. However, you may not always be able to work through your thoughts, and according to many experts, finding a distraction, such as by doing an activity you enjoy or learning a new skill, can help. This might help you forget some things, and even if you don't, you get an opportunity to relax and recharge. I love this point. Make an action plan. So let's imagine that we are applying this to learning English, and you write down some thoughts which says, I'm worried about what people are going to think. I'm scared of making a mistake. My pronunciation is not good enough. My vocabulary isn't quite there. Blah, blah, blah. All of these thoughts that we all have as learners of another language. Well, let's pick one of those and make an action plan. So perhaps what's holding us back is our overthinking our use of vocabulary. We're worried that our vocabulary is just not quite there or not advanced enough. Whatever overthinking we do when it comes to vocabulary. Well, once we've written it down, let's make an action plan. Okay, well, if that's how I feel, I need to improve my vocabulary, or I need to improve my attitude towards my current vocabulary. And then create an action plan. Maybe that is studying vocabulary a little bit more, or maybe that is trying to use the new words that we know but we're scared to use because they're out of our comfort zone. It's an action plan. Or perhaps our thing is I'm worried about just talking to others. Well, an action plan could be just having a conversation with ourselves in the mirror, picking up the phone, talking to a friend rather than writing down messages, then talking to some strangers, blah, blah, blah. Action plans. What can we do with those overthought thoughts to fix them, to address them? And I love this next point. Particularly, I guess this applies if we are just naturally an overthinker in life. Find a distraction. Find something that you can enjoy and learn a new skill. And I also believe this applies to English. Imagine if there's something you love, imagine doing that related to the English language. Maybe there's an online book club in English that you can enjoy because you love reading. Well, now the focus isn't on perhaps the English language. You're doing something you love. So you're not going to overthink and worry about it so much. But if we are an overthinker, generally, just find a distraction. Just find something you can do which just takes your mind off everything. I've got a few things I like to do, just hobbies, little things. I don't have a lot of time, but if it's just half an hour, and you just switch off. It's like you kind of just turn the noise off in your mind. It says, it might just help you to forget some things and, get an opportunity to relax and recharge. And I had a student bring this to me the other day, saying, I'm just feeling overwhelmed with the English language. I'm taking in as much as I can. I'm really trying my best, but excuse me, I just don't feel like I'm improving. And I said, well, how much are you studying? She goes, I just don't stop. I'm just studying all the time. I said, well, do you know what? Have a break. And the student was almost shocked by this. I said, just have a day off. Have a day off from English. Just read a book in your native language and just come back to it another day. Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry if that... I'm dying. I'm sorry if that went down the microphone. But just... English isn't a thing that we just have a time scale to learn. It's something, it really becomes part of our life. Oh, I really should have brought some water out with me. Excuse me. There we go. Okay, that's better. English is part of our life. So I just realised how unprofessional that is. I could have just stopped recording and come back to it instead of coughing down a microphone. So I do apologise if you were listening to that. I'll work on it. But sometimes just take a day off. This is just a long process. Learning English is part of our life. We're never going to stop. So if you're feeling overwhelmed and it's all just getting a little bit too much, take a day off, come back to it with just a fresh, new set of eyes, whatever it is. Or find, if you've been listening to my podcast for ages and you're just feeling a little bit stale with it, go over to someone else's. There's great podcasts out there. And then come back to me and catch up. But just mix it up, have a break. And if you need to, just switch off from English. And then come back to it, because it's not going to benefit us in any way if we're just always overthinking and stressing about it. We need to find a way to decompress. And there's just a nice point here. I'm by no means a health expert, but it says here that if you feel you really can't find a way to deal with overthinking, Healthline says you should try speaking to an expert, which is true. There's some brilliant experts out there that can most definitely help you. So if it is something, I guess, that is really affecting your life, and see an expert. But of course, we're applying it to the English language. That always, overthinking is such an issue. It's such a problem. But let's just try to realise how useless it is. And just try and isolate those thoughts that are making you overthink. Write them down and look at them from a reasonable, a logical perspective, rather than taking it completely out of proportion and then allowing it to stop us from reaching our full potential, allowing it to stop us from getting to the point that we know that we can. It's just an article there, just a thought that I really did want to share with you. I hope you benefited from that. And also, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Are you an overthinker? What helps you? We've got a great little community building here with the podcast. So what helps you? Very good. So thank you so much for watching today. I hope you've got, what day is this going out? Oh, this is going out on Sunday. So your weekend would have been over. But I hope you've had time this weekend to rest, relax, unwind a little bit, whatever you like to do at the weekend. I was going to clean the car. I quite enjoy cleaning the car. That's something I do to switch my mind off. I love getting the car all shiny, polishing that. I was going to do that, but it's just started raining in fantastic English style. So that shall not be happening now. But yeah, I hope you have a lovely weekend. Rest, relax, and please don't forget to send me anything you've got on this podcast for next week's celebratory episode. But thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe, give this video a like, and I will see you all very soon. Have a good one, guys.